This is the third day of trial for Jason Van Dyke. By now, most of us have seen the controversial tapes of the Laquan McDonald shooting. One of the men responsible for the release of that footage is with us. Welcome community activist Wiliam Calloway.
Hi, Will. I want to start off by asking you, how did you get involved with this case to begin with, to even push for the release of the tape? When did you know what happened to Laquan McDonald?
Oh, well, I overheard the tape. A tape existed by the attorneys of Laquan McDonald in 2015. Once I heard about the tape, I notified independent journalist Brandon Smith, and we filed the FOIA.
Did you ever believe or know that it was going to be this big on magnitude level? I mean, this video has now been seen across the world.
Never. I never thought in a million years it would have had the effect that it had on Chicago and policing in Chicago.
Do you think it would have had the same effect had it been released immediately?
Nah, because I think that plays into the notion of a cover-up. The mayor knew, Rom covered it up, and it took, because of the pressure of the activist community and the journalist community, that's the only reason it came out.
Right, and you have been sitting in the trial every day for the last 3 days, right?
I have. I've attended most of the court hearings. I just left court to come here and do this interview, and I'm on my way back once this is over.
Now, I interviewed Tiffany Van Dyke, and I know you saw that interview because you said, she said her husband is a gentle giant. You came on and said, what I saw on that tape does not look like a gentle giant. Tiffany Van Dyke's side says that there are things that will come out in court that will show that he was doing his job. Have you seen anything so far in the last 3 days, evidence-wise, that would show you that Jason Van Dyke was just doing his job?
And the facts of the case is that Jason Van Dyke has over 20 complaints against him. Majority of them was for excessive force against African Americans, okay? He shot Laquan 16 times. 14 of those shots came while Laquan was laying lifeless on the ground. That's not a gentle giant, that's a racist murderer. And that we're gonna call it for what it is.
Right. Do you think a murder conviction will come down?
We hope. We're cautiously optimistic. He took a jury trial, as everybody know. I'm not too pleased with the diversity makeup of the jury. It's only one black person on the jury, 7 whites, 3 Hispanics, 1 Asian, and 1 black. So I'm kind of disappointed by that, but we'll see.
When you say you hope that he gets convicted of murder, what is your gut telling you? You're in there, you know what's been said, you know the charge that's against him, you know what the defense has to prove without reasonable doubt. Are you convinced that he's gonna get convicted?
I'm not sure. I sat in that same courthouse about 4 years ago and watched Dante Servin get acquitted for shooting Rekia Boyd. Dante was an off-duty police officer. He shot Rekia Boyd, was an unarmed black woman, and she was defenseless, unarmed. He was aiming for somebody else, and he got off. And then we have overwhelming video evidence of the shooting. To me, it's nothing to talk about. He should have been in jail.
In terms of Jason Van Dyke, but one of the things that is going on here is that Laquan McDonald was armed, right? I mean, that is, and there is police training and there is protocol as it relates to an armed individual with a knife. There had been at least 24 hours that there had been 911 calls about him, but there had also, in these last few minutes, a lot of radio traffic. At one point, just right before this moment, he stabbed the tires out on a police vehicle. He tried to stab, he was chipping away at the window of a police vehicle. Now, those officers didn't do anything about that, right? They were still driving around. There was one officer from that vehicle behind him on foot that was following him, and then they follow him to this, and he runs away from them. And then as he's approaching, now he's moving fairly quickly, as he's approaching, you have these other 2 officers who are now on the line with him, essentially. And the question really is it going to be, if this had come out immediately when it had come out, and the police had gotten the story straight, right? That's a big piece here, and there hadn't been any things that look like an attempt to cover up. Do you think that, given, there's so many other cases, Rekia Boyd isn't, I agree with you on that case. I agree with you on the case that's going on in Dallas right now, where the guy's in his own apartment and gets shot, right? The case in Minneapolis, where guys reaching for a driver's license to get shot. I get that. But you do have an armed individual who is...
with a pocket knife.
But it's a 3-inch blade.
Okay. Hold on. But I'm just saying, so we got to bring that up.
It's a 3-inch blade.
Right.
Right.
Going
But as he's going, he gets within the range, and they are constantly telling him to drop the knife and stop. And the prosecutor said that this was the audacity of a black man not to stop is why he got shot. Right? That was part of the prosecutor's argument here. I would submit: is it about audacity, or does an armed individual who's being pursued by the police, for their own self-interest, should they stop and take this to court as opposed to risking being shot?
I'm not sure. At the end of the day, Laquan had a 3-inch blade on him. Laquan was walking away from law enforcement. Right. These are the facts of the case. If the Chicago Police Department didn't feel they did anything wrong, they wouldn't falsify police reports. Now police officers falsify police reports. 3 of them are currently indicted for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Those are the facts. If they didn't do anything wrong or feel that they did anything wrong, that wouldn't happen. And as far as any other notion, look, Jason Van Dyke is a murderer, and that's how the activist community looks at it. That's how majority of the black community looks at it, and that's what we want to convey to your viewers. He is a murderer. He belongs in prison. What he did was completely unreasonable. As you spoke, there was an officer following Laquan for 3 blocks with his gun in his hand, never fired a shot. And he testified yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, Monday or yesterday, that he never was in fear of his life.
Did he even say, help me, because you were in there, did an officer radio ahead to the 2 officers that were there and say something along the lines of no need to fire? And did I hear that or read that correctly?
I believe so. And also the officers also requested a taser. So that's in training. When
I don't know about the no need to fire, but a taser for
you
sure.
should talk about de-escalation. Just because somebody seems that they have a 3-inch blade doesn't automatically give you the right to use deadly or lethal force. As a peace officer, you should have de-escalation training as well to engage with citizens or civilians.
But let me ask you this question though: if he were walking away from that officer who was behind him, and then he turned back and came toward the officer, would that officer have had the right to shoot?
That's a different story, and that's a different circumstances. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about hypotheticals. Okay. We're talking about what actually happened.
But if it were the case, as he's going beam of the officer and he turns his shoulder toward the officer, that was when the first shot was fired. So that's going to be on. They're going to be looking at that like it's going to be that's going to be a slow motion replay. In real time, there are questions about this. I understand the pain that the community feels. Yes, no question.
It's the 16 shots. It's not
wrong.
If somebody's coming towards an officer, yes, they have the right to shoot.
Yes.
Okay, I'm married, I'm not married, but I'm engaged to a state police officer. I get it. That's what they're trained if someone's coming towards you. But in this case, your point, I feel, is valid because there were 16 shots. And your point is valid if it was but that has to play out in court. Okay. We have to know and see and find out where Laquan was going and if it was justified, and that will happen. I'm sorry. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, y'all.